The gentle giant's commander Zelthrix of the Vorthak Empire stood before the holographic display showing the third planet from a yellow star. Earth, the inhabitants called it. His forearms crossed in what his species considered a gesture of contemplation as he studied the intelligence reports flowing across his command console. The Vorthak had been expanding their territory for over 3 centuries, bringing order and structure to chaotic star systems throughout this arm of the galaxy. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense, but rather organizers. Species that could not govern themselves properly required guidance, and the Vorthak provided that guidance with systematic efficiency. Earth had caught their attention 6 months ago when human vessels had first ventured beyond their home system. The initial contact protocols had been unusual. Instead of the typical defensive posturing or aggressive demands most species displayed, the humans had transmitted what could only be described as an invitation. "Welcome to our neighborhood," the transmission had begun, spoken by a woman who identified herself as Ambassador Elena Rodriguez. "We are honored by your presence and would love to share our culture, our knowledge, and our friendship with you." Zelthrix had reviewed that transmission dozens of times. In his experience, only 3 types of species offered immediate cooperation: those too primitive to understand the situation, those so advanced they felt no threat, or those so desperate they would grovel for mercy. Humans seemed to fall into the first category. The intelligence report supported this assessment. Human military technology was crude by galactic standards. Their weapons relied primarily on kinetic projectiles and basic energy systems that the Vorthak had surpassed centuries ago. Their defensive capabilities were limited to simple shield generators and hull armor that would barely slow down modern weapon systems. More telling was their behavior. When Vorthak scout ships approached human installations, the humans responded with gifts. Actual gifts. Cultural artifacts, mathematical principles, even biological samples from their homeworld. They seemed genuinely excited about the prospect of joining some kind of galactic community. "Commander," reported his intelligence officer Thys, "we have completed our assessment of human military capabilities. Their fleet consists of approximately 2,000 vessels, most designed for exploration rather than combat. Their planetary defenses are minimal, focusing on asteroid deflection rather than military threats." Zelthrix nodded, his large head bobbing slowly. The Vorthak had faced species with 10 times the military capacity of these humans and found victory straightforward. But it was not just their weakness that made humans appealing targets. It was their resources. Earth was remarkably rich in rare elements. The system contained 3 habitable worlds when terraforming was considered, and the asteroid belt held enough raw materials to fuel Vorthak expansion for decades. The humans had barely begun to exploit these resources, living primarily on their homeworld and maintaining only small colonies elsewhere. "What of their population centers?" Zelthrix asked. "Highly concentrated, Commander. The majority of their 8 billion inhabitants live in large cities. Their infrastructure is centralized, making it vulnerable to disruption. More importantly, they have shown no signs of military conscription or combat training for their civilian population." This was the detail that sealed their fate in Zelthrix's mind. Throughout galactic history, species that survived first contact with superior civilizations shared one common trait. They militarized quickly. They might start weak, but they recognized the threat and adapted. Humans seemed content to remain vulnerable. The decision to incorporate the human system into the Vorthak Empire was made with the same methodical consideration that characterized all their actions. It would be accomplished in phases, with minimal force required to ensure compliance. Phase 1 began with the arrival of the full Vorthak fleet at the edge of human space. 37 vessels of advanced design, each one capable of devastating entire planetary surfaces. They took position around the outer system and waited for the human response. Ambassador Rodriguez appeared on their communication channels within hours, her face showing excitement rather than fear. "This is incredible. We never expected such a large delegation. We're prepared to host formal first contact ceremonies on Mars. Our finest diplomats and scientists are eager to meet with you." Zelthrix almost felt sorry for her. Such enthusiasm would make the transition more difficult for the humans to accept, but it could not be helped. "Ambassador Rodriguez," he replied through the translation matrix, "we appreciate your welcome. However, we come not as visitors but as administrators. Your system has been selected for incorporation into the Vorthak Empire. Compliance will ensure minimal disruption to your population." The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. When Rodriguez responded, her voice had changed, becoming more formal. "Commander, I believe there may be some misunderstanding. Humanity is not seeking incorporation into any empire. We value our independence and our right to self-determination." "Such values are admirable, but impractical," Zelthrix explained patiently. "Your species lacks the experience and structure necessary for effective governance on a galactic scale. The Vorthak will provide the guidance you require." Over the following days, the human response confirmed every assessment Zelthrix had made about their nature. Instead of mobilizing their military, they convened endless diplomatic meetings. Instead of fortifying their positions, they sent cultural envoys to establish better communication. Instead of preparing for war, they seemed to be preparing for negotiation. When diplomacy clearly failed, Zelthrix authorized the first military action. Vorthak forces moved against the human mining stations in the asteroid belt, expecting token resistance that could be quickly overcome. The human response was both exactly what he had expected and somehow surprising. Their defense forces fought with courage and determination, but their tactics were restrained. Human ships would withdraw when faced with overwhelming odds rather than fighting to destruction. Their commanders prioritized civilian evacuations over strategic advantages. They even transmitted medical assistance to damaged Vorthak vessels. "These humans fight as if war has rules," observed his tactical officer during the battle review. "As if showing mercy to enemies is more important than achieving victory." Zelthrix nodded in agreement. It was almost endearing in its naivety. The humans seemed genuinely unable to comprehend that their enemies would not reciprocate their ethical constraints. The pattern continued as Vorthak forces advanced through the outer system. Human colonies on Europa and Titan offered resistance, but it was the resistance of soldiers trying to minimize casualties on both sides. They used defensive positions to cover evacuations rather than to maximize enemy losses. They respected Vorthak surrender flags and prisoner protocols that the Vorthak had never actually offered. After 6 weeks of systematic conquest, Zelthrix had occupied every major human installation beyond Earth's orbit. The human fleet had been reduced to less than half its original strength, not through destruction but through strategic withdrawals. Their government continued to send diplomatic messages, pleading for negotiation and offering concessions that showed they still did not understand their situation. The breaking point came during the conquest of Mars. The Red Planet housed nearly 2 million human colonists and served as their primary military headquarters outside Earth. Zelthrix had expected the fiercest resistance here, but instead found the most frustrating. Human defenders used the planet's unique geography to their advantage, creating defensive positions in canyon systems and underground installations. But rather than holding these positions to the death, they used them as delaying tactics to cover civilian evacuations. Entire cities were abandoned in organized retreats that prioritized saving lives over saving territory. Admiral Sarah Martinez, the human military commander on Mars, even transmitted offers to surrender the planet in exchange for safe passage for non-combatants. She seemed genuinely confused when Zelthrix explained that surrender would not protect her people from incorporation into the Vorthak labor system. The moment that changed everything happened during the final assault on New Shanghai, Mars' largest city. A human civilian transport, the New Horizon, was fleeing the city with nearly 10,000 refugees aboard. The ship was clearly marked with humanitarian symbols and broadcasting civilian identification codes. Lieutenant Vex, commanding a Vorthak interceptor squadron, made what he later claimed was a targeting error. His plasma barrage tore through the transport's hull, killing everyone aboard in seconds. Zelthrix witnessed the destruction from his command ship's bridge. He saw the New Horizon break apart, saw the escape pods that never launched, saw 10,000 lives snuffed out in an instant. It was not the death that disturbed him. The Vorthak had caused far more casualties in other conquests. It was the silence that followed. For the first time since the invasion began, human communication channels went completely quiet. No diplomatic protests, no demands for explanation, no pleas for mercy. Just silence. Admiral Martinez's final transmission came 12 hours later. Her face appeared on every Vorthak communication channel simultaneously, which should have been impossible given their encrypted networks. "Commander Zelthrix," she said, her voice carrying none of the diplomatic warmth or moral pleading that had characterized human communications for 2 months. "You wanted to see what humans are truly capable of. You wanted to test whether we were as weak as we appeared. Congratulations. You've succeeded." Behind her, holographic displays showed technical schematics that made Zelthrix's intelligence officers scramble for analysis stations, weapon designs that violated several known principles of physics, starship configurations that suggested faster-than-light travel beyond anything in the Vorthak arsenal, manufacturing facilities that had somehow remained hidden despite months of orbital surveillance. "The funny thing about humans," Martinez continued, "is that we're actually very good at war. We've just spent the last century choosing not to be. You've reminded us why we made that choice in the first place." The transmission ended with coordinates for a meeting in neutral space and a simple message. "You have 72 hours to withdraw all forces to the edge of our system. After that, we stop playing by rules you never agreed to follow." As Zelthrix stared at the empty screen, he realized that everything his intelligence reports had told him about human weakness might have been tragically wrong. The humans had not been unable to fight effectively. They had been choosing not to. When Giants Fall Admiral Marcus Chen stood in the war room 3 levels beneath Geneva, a facility that officially did not exist, the holographic displays surrounding him showed the true scope of human military capability, systems and technologies that had been developed in secret over the past 50 years, but never deployed. The room buzzed with activity as military officials, scientists and intelligence operatives coordinated humanity's response to the Vorthak invasion. For 2 months, they had watched their outer colonies fall while following protocols designed to minimize casualties and preserve diplomatic options. That time was over. "Status report," Chen ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades preparing for this exact scenario. Colonel Sarah Kim, head of Project Fenris, stepped forward. "All stealth fleets are in position, Admiral. Ghost Squadron is maintaining position in the asteroid belt. Shadow Wing is deployed beyond Vorthak sensor range near Jupiter, and Wraith Division has infiltrated their supply lines." Chen nodded. The Vorthak had made a critical error in their assessment of human technology. They had observed humanity's civilian infrastructure and older military vessels, but they had never detected the advanced fleets humanity had been developing in complete secrecy. Project Fenris had begun 30 years ago when humanity's first deep space probes encountered evidence of advanced alien civilizations. The discovery that humans were not alone in the universe had prompted a massive classified military development program. While humanity presented a peaceful face to the galaxy, they had been preparing for the possibility that not all alien species would share their diplomatic inclinations. "What about our manufacturing capabilities?" Chen asked. Dr. Elizabeth Stone, head of Advanced Weapons Development, consulted her datapad. "All hidden facilities are operating at full capacity. The orbital shipyards in the Oort cloud have completed construction of the new Phoenix-class destroyers. The Lunar Farsight installation has finished testing the quantum torpedo systems, and the Mars deep core facilities have manufactured enough stealth mines to blockade their entire fleet." Chen allowed himself a small smile. The Vorthak had observed human mining operations on Mars but had never detected the massive military complex hidden 15 kilometers beneath the planet's surface. Their own occupation forces were literally sitting on top of one of humanity's most advanced weapons manufacturing centers. Intelligence assessment. Major David Park, recently returned from deep cover aboard a Vorthak vessel, stepped forward. "Their command structure is rigid and hierarchical. Commander Zelthrix makes all strategic decisions with input from a small council of senior officers. Their communication systems are heavily encrypted, but follow predictable patterns. Most importantly, they genuinely believe they're facing primitive opposition. Chen studied the tactical displays showing Vorthak fleet positions throughout the solar system. 37 ships arranged in a blockade formation that would be devastating against conventional forces. Against what the humans were about to deploy, it was simply target practice. Analysis of their technology? Advanced but not insurmountable, reported Chief Engineer Amanda Foster. Their weapon systems are approximately 50 years ahead of our publicly acknowledged technology, but we've surpassed them in several key areas they're not aware of. Their shields can't adapt to quantum phase weapons, their hulls are vulnerable to molecular disruptors, and their faster-than-light drives create sensor shadows we can exploit. The irony was not lost on Chen. Humanity had intentionally presented themselves as less advanced than they truly were, hoping to avoid exactly the kind of conflict they now faced. But their peaceful intentions had been misinterpreted as weakness, and their restraint had been seen as inability. Implementation timeline? Colonel Kim consulted her chronometer. Phase 1 begins in 18 hours. Ghost Squadron will begin harassment attacks on their supply convoys. Phase 2 initiates 12 hours later with the revelation of our stealth capabilities. Phase 3, full tactical engagement, begins once they understand the true scope of their miscalculation. Chen approved the timeline with a gesture. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Demonstrate to the Vorthak that every assumption they had made about human capabilities was wrong, then offer them a single opportunity to withdraw with their lives. The first phase began exactly on schedule. Vorthak supply convoys began disappearing throughout the outer system, their automated distress signals cut off mid-transmission. Reconnaissance patrols found empty space where cargo ships should have been, with no debris, no energy signatures, and no explanation. Commander Zelthrix initially dismissed these incidents as mechanical failures or navigational errors. The Vorthak had been operating in human space for months without significant opposition. The idea that humans had somehow developed advanced stealth technology seemed impossible. The pattern became undeniable when an entire supply fleet vanished while under escort by Vorthak warships. The escorts reported all systems normal, then their own signals disappeared from the communication network. When search teams arrived at their last known coordinates, they found nothing but empty space and residual quantum signatures that shouldn't have been possible with known human technology. Phase 2 began with a demonstration that violated everything the Vorthak thought they knew about human capabilities. At precisely 800 hours, 47 human vessels materialized inside the Vorthak defensive perimeter, appearing simultaneously at locations that should have been impossible to reach undetected. The ships themselves were unlike anything in the Vorthak database. Sleek, angular designs that seemed to bend light around their hulls. Weapon systems that fired energy beams in colors that shouldn't exist, and propulsion signatures that suggested they were manipulating space-time itself. "This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force," came the transmission that reached every Vorthak vessel simultaneously. "You are surrounded and outgunned. You have one opportunity to withdraw from human space with your lives. Consider carefully." Commander Zelthrix stared at the tactical display showing his fleet surrounded by vessels that had appeared from nowhere. His intelligence officers were frantically analyzing the new ships, trying to understand technology that seemed to violate several fundamental principles of physics. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our sensors showed no indication of advanced human capabilities." His science officer Theiss was reviewing scan data with obvious confusion. "Commander, these vessels are incorporating technology we don't recognize. Their hulls are composed of materials that appear to exist in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. Their weapon systems are generating energy frequencies that shouldn't be stable. And their propulsion, they seem to be moving through space rather than across it." Zelthrix realized he was facing a species that had deliberately hidden their true capabilities. The humans had not been weak. They had been pretending to be weak. Every diplomatic overture, every restrained military response, every apparent act of naivety had been calculated to maintain the illusion that they were primitive and harmless. The demonstration continued with a precision that spoke of careful, Planning and superior technology. Human vessels disabled Vorthak ships with weapons that somehow bypassed their shields entirely. Boarding parties appeared inside secured areas without any indication of how they had arrived. Critical systems failed in patterns that suggested the humans had detailed knowledge of Vorthak technology. But it was the psychological warfare that proved most effective. Vorthak personnel began reporting encounters with humans who seemed to appear and disappear at will. Equipment would malfunction in ways that spelled out messages in Vorthak script. Personal communication devices would activate spontaneously to broadcast human voices speaking perfect Vorthak, sometimes using information that should have been classified at the highest levels. The breaking point came during what would later be known as the Battle of Ceres Station. The massive asteroid had been converted into a Vorthak forward operating base, housing nearly 10,000 troops and serving as the command center for their occupation forces. Admiral Chen himself led the assault, commanding a single human vessel against the entire Vorthak defensive network. The engagement lasted exactly 17 minutes, during which the human ship demonstrated capabilities that redefined Vorthak understanding of what was possible in space combat. The vessel moved through solid matter as if it were empty space, appearing inside the station's defensive perimeter and launching attacks from impossible angles. Its weapons seemed to target specific individuals rather than general areas, striking down Vorthak officers while leaving their subordinates unharmed. Most disturbing of all, the ship appeared to be in multiple locations simultaneously, suggesting technology that allowed it to exist in several dimensional phases at once. When the battle ended, Ceres Station was intact but completely under human control. Every Vorthak weapon system had been disabled without damaging life support or civilian areas. Every senior officer had been captured, while junior personnel remained free but confined to quarters. It was a display of precision and restraint that demonstrated not just superior technology, but superior understanding of Vorthak psychology and tactics. Commander Zelthrix found himself in the uncomfortable position of watching his empire's most advanced military force systematically outmaneuvered by a species he had dismissed as primitive. The humans were not just winning, they were winning while following rules of engagement that prioritized minimizing casualties on both sides. The final ultimatum came from Admiral Chen personally, transmitted from the bridge of his flagship directly to Zelthrix's command center. The human admiral appeared as a hologram, surrounded by displays showing the current positions of every Vorthak vessel in the system. "Commander Zelthrix," Chen began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You came to our system, believing we were weak because we chose diplomacy over warfare. You interpreted our restraint as inability, and our mercy as naivety. These were grave miscalculations." Behind Chen, technical displays showed the true scope of human military capability. Orbital installations that had been hidden in plain sight, manufacturing facilities that had operated undetected for decades, and weapon systems that incorporated principles of physics the Vorthak had never encountered. Humanity has spent the last century developing the capability to defend ourselves against exactly this kind of aggression. Chen continued. We hoped we would never need to use these capabilities. We genuinely believed that most intelligent species would prefer cooperation to conquest. You have proven us wrong. The hologram shifted to show the current tactical situation. Every Vorthak vessel was surrounded by human ships that had been invisible until this moment. Supply lines had been completely severed. Communication networks had been compromised. The invasion force was trapped, surrounded, and outgunned by technology they couldn't understand. You have two choices, Chen stated simply. You can withdraw from human space immediately and never return, taking with you the knowledge that humanity is not the easy target you believed us to be. Or you can continue this conflict and discover just how effectively we can wage war when we stop trying to minimize casualties. The transmission ended with coordinates for a safe corridor out of the solar system and a simple countdown timer, 12 hours. Commander Zelthrix spent those 12 hours reviewing intelligence reports, analyzing the tactical situation, and trying to understand how his empire's most successful military force had been outmaneuvered so completely. The conclusion was unavoidable. Humanity possessed technology and capabilities that far exceeded anything in the Vorthak arsenal, and they had deliberately concealed these advantages while attempting peaceful resolution. The retreat began with 11 hours and 37 minutes remaining on the countdown. Vorthak vessels withdrew in organized formations, their progress monitored by human ships that remained invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. The withdrawal was permitted without harassment, demonstrating that humanity's military superiority came with the same ethical constraints that had characterized their diplomacy. As his fleet reached the edge of the solar system, Zelthrix transmitted a final message to Admiral Chen. "We underestimated your capabilities and your resolve. This will not happen again." Chen's response was immediate. "Commander, we hope it will not need to happen again. Humanity remains interested in peaceful contact with other species, but any future diplomatic relations will be conducted with full understanding of our actual capabilities." The Vorthak fleet departed human space and never returned. Within days, reports of humanity's hidden military strength spread throughout local space. Species that had been considering their own invasive actions quietly abandoned those plans. Others reached out through diplomatic channels, expressing interest in peaceful contact with a species that possessed advanced technology, but chose to use it defensively. Admiral Chen returned to the hidden facility beneath Geneva, where Project ER Fenris assets were quietly returned to standby status. Humanity had revealed their true capabilities to protect themselves, but they had done so in a way that emphasized their continued preference for peaceful resolution of conflicts. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. They were not peaceful because they were weak. They were peaceful because they were strong and chose restraint. It was a choice that other species would respect, or face the consequences of their miscalculation. Earth remained humanity's home, but it was no longer seen as an easy target. The species that had offered gifts and friendship to potential conquerors had proven they could wage war with terrifying efficiency when necessary. It was a reputation that served them well in a galaxy where strength was the only currency that truly mattered.